Today, we're going to be checking out why isn't Lesotho part of South Africa? We gotta go ahead and check this out, man. Let's get right into it.
And it's in Africa. That country is Lesotho. Why isn't it just part of South Africa? To answer that, we have to go back to a time of war, migration and collapse. To a mountain fortress that couldn't be taken. And to a leader who understood something. Sometimes survival comes not from winning battles, but from avoiding them. On a map, Lesotho looks small and completely exposed. But that's misleading, because Lesotho isn't just another piece of land, it's a fortress. And this geography is the first reason it isn't part of South Africa. Almost the entire country sits high in the mountains, over 1,000 meters above.
Lesotho really reminds me of the tribe in Black Panther. Y'all know the tribe in Black Panther where they live like high up in the mountains where it's like freezing and stuff like that. And one of the guys I can't think of his name, bruh. It's been a while since I've seen Black Panther, but the one that challenged, it's on the first Black Panther, the one that challenged the Black Panther to be the Black Panther. Forgot his name, bro. I can't believe I forgot his name, but y'all know who I'm talking about, bro. Like, that's what Lesotho reminds me of. Reminds me of them. I know that they do have a representation of Sutus in the movie, the ones that are wearing the blankets, but I don't think it's the same tribe as the ones that are living in the mountains in the movie in the Black Panther.
Of sea level, with most of it rising far higher. These aren't gentle hills, they're steep ridges, narrow passes, and deep valleys that are difficult to navigate, even today. In Lesotho, the kingdom in the sky, the land itself became a weapon. A weapon in the hands of one crucial man, Moshoeshoe. In the early 1800s, Southern Africa was collapsing into chaos. An upheaval known as the Umfakane. A time of war, displacement and mass migration across southern Africa, driven in part by the expansion of powerful kingdoms like that of Shaka. Instead of simply defending his people, Moshoeshoe began gathering others, refugees and displaced groups. Over time, these scattered people became something new, a single unified people, the Basotho. But unity alone wasn't enough. Because in a world this unstable, any settlement on open ground could be destroyed overnight. So Moshoeshoe made a critical decision. He moved his people to a mountain, Thaba Bosiu, a flat-topped stronghold that rose sharply from the surrounding land. Difficult to reach, easy to defend. From its heights, the Basotho could see danger coming. And when African groups...
I feel like the best way to explain that, I don't know a lot of you, but for those who play like shooting games, Call of Duty games, you always want to, you always know you have the advantage if you have the higher ground against people, bro. Like in a firefight, you always have the advantage when you have when you're on top of a mountain or a building and they're below, you always have the advantage. So I'm guessing it's similar to what he's with the Lesotho people. They had the advantage of being higher than, the rest of the people.
Or Boer commandos tried to attack. They faced steep climbs, narrow approaches, and defenders who knew the terrain. Time and again, those attacks failed, and with each failure, Moshoeshoe's position grew stronger. But what truly set him apart wasn't just where he settled, it was how he ruled. He didn't rely on conquest alone. He used diplomacy, absorbing enemies instead of destroying them, building alliances, because new forces were arriving in the region. European settlers, British colonial administrators, Cape Colony governors like Sir George Napier and Philip Woodhouse. Moshoeshoe understood that survival required strategy, not just strength. And that foresight would shape the future of Lesotho. By the mid-1800s, the balance Moshoeshoe had built was coming under increasing pressure. In the west, Boer settlers, many of whom had moved inland during the Great Trek, were establishing farms and communities across the interior of southern Africa. One of these regions would become the Orange Free State. Under leaders like Johannes Brunt, the Orange Free State sought to consolidate its territory and secure land for its settlers, and that brought it into direct competition with the Basotho, because the same fertile lowlands that attracted Boer farmers were also essential to Basotho agriculture and grazing. At first, the boundary between the two wasn't clearly defined. Claims overlapped. Raids and reprisals became more frequent. Cattle, wealth in this world, were taken and retaken. From 1858, the Basotho and the Orange Free State fought repeatedly over territory along the Caledon River. Neither side had a decisive advantage. The Basotho could withdraw into the mountains, where they were difficult to pursue. The Free State forces, however, operated from the surrounding plains and maintained more stable supply lines. In the later phases of the war, Free State forces adopted more systematic campaigns, targeting crops, livestock, and settlements. By the mid-1860s, the situation had become critical. Food shortages spread, territory was lost, and for the first time, the survival of Moshoeshoe's state was in real doubt. He had built a functioning polity out of the upheaval of the Mfukane. He had used geography to offset military pressure. But now, those advantages were no longer enough on their own. So he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing the conflict alone, he turned to a different kind of power. He appealed directly to the British. In a letter to Philip Woodhouse in 1865, he offered to place his territory under British protection. He wrote, "I am giving myself and my country up to Her Majesty's government." Moshoeshoe understood something crucial. If the Basotho remained independent and isolated, they risked being absorbed by the Orange Free State. But under British protection, that outcome could be prevented. For the British, the decision was not straightforward. They had limited interest in direct control over a mountainous, resource-constrained region. But there were also strategic considerations. Officials like Woodhouse were concerned about the continued expansion of the Orange Free State. A strong Boer republic in the region could complicate British influence and disrupt stability along the frontier. So in 1868, a decision was made. Under the authority of Queen Victoria, Basotho territory was declared a British protectorate. It became known as Basutoland. This changed the trajectory of the region.
Bro, how did they get this news across back then, bro? I always wonder, like, how fast, like, because of course he's explaining, like, yo, they said this, you know what I mean? But how long did it take for this information to get out to each party? You know, and these days it's easy to, you know, send an email or post it on social media. Like, it's easy for that information to get across. Do y'all know how long it probably took for this information to get to everybody, to get to each party so everybody knows what's going on? And then if they disagree, they got to send something back, and how long that would take. Bro, these conversations had to take a long time, bro.
The wars with the Orange Free State came to an end. The remaining Basotho territory was secured from further annexation. And for the first time, the boundaries of what eventually became Lesotho began to take shape. But British protection did not mean full integration. Basutoland was administered separately, and, crucially, large-scale European settlement was limited. That distinction would prove important, because as the political map of southern Africa continued to evolve,
is that what it looked like?
Basutoland was already on a different path.
Look how they British, hold on, go back. Look how they bordered everything, bro. Just like separated everybody, bro. Like before the British came, I feel like this was all just one. Like everybody integrated with people, or probably many people just stayed where they were. But then because of the British, it made people integrate and move out and go this and there and everywhere, bro. But it's crazy how, you know what I'm saying, the way we live today is because of how this happened then. You know what I mean? As far as the way as Africa is multiple countries and territoried and things like that is because of the British and how things were back then.
Continued to evolve. Basutoland was already on a different path. British protection secured Basutoland from external threats. The country was administered through the Cape Colony, but tensions began to surface. British officials sought to extend colonial law, taxation, and governance into the region. Men like Henry Berkeley and later Gordon Sprigg supported a more direct system of control. From their perspective, this was a matter of consistency. Basutoland, like other territories, was expected to conform to colonial administration. But for many Basotho leaders, this raised concerns. Authority within Basotho society had traditionally been exercised through chiefs. Land allocation, dispute resolution, and local governance were embedded in that system. Changes imposed from outside risked disrupting that balance. Tensions built gradually, and then, in 1879, a specific policy brought those tensions to a head. The Cape government moved to enforce disarmament under the Peace Preservation Act. Firearms were to be surrendered in exchange for compensation. From the colonial perspective, this was a standard measure, but in Basutoland, firearms had a different significance. They were tied to security, status, and the ability to defend land and livestock. Compliance was limited, resistance grew, and by 1880, that resistance became open conflict. The uprising that followed would become known as the Gun War. It was led in part by figures such as Mansa, a son of Moshoeshoe, alongside other Basotho leaders. The Cape Colony government responded by mobilizing its forces. Commanders like Charles Clark were tasked with restoring control. On paper, the balance of power seemed clear, but in practice the situation was more complicated. Basotho fighters used mobility and terrain to their advantage, and supply lines for colonial forces were stretched across difficult ground. The result was not a decisive campaign, but a prolonged and costly stalemate. Despite sustained efforts, colonial forces were unable to secure a clear victory. At the same time, the financial and political cost of the conflict began to rise. And so, under High Commissioner Hercules Robinson, a negotiated settlement was reached in 1881. The Basotho were allowed to retain their firearms. For the Cape government, it was a compromise. For the Basotho, it preserved a key element of their autonomy. Basutoland had shown it could not easily be governed through standard colonial methods. And within a few years, that conclusion led to another shift. In 1884, Basutoland was removed from Cape control and placed directly under the British Crown. It became a High Commission territory, administered separately from surrounding colonies. That separation would prove significant, because as Southern Africa moved toward political union in the decades that followed, Basutoland was already being treated differently, not fully independent, but distinct. In 1910, the Union of South Africa was created. It brought together the Cape Colony, Natal, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State into a single state. At that moment, the question arose, what about Basutoland? Geographically, its inclusion might have seemed logical, but incorporating Basutoland into the Union was not simply a geographic decision. It was a political one. From the British perspective, there were several reasons to keep it separate. First, stability. Basutoland had a history of resistance to external control, as seen during the Gun War. Integrating it into a new political system risked reigniting tensions. Second, administration. The territory was already governed differently, with a degree of reliance on local chiefs and existing structures. Folding it into the Union would require a restructuring that offered little immediate benefit. And third, strategic considerations. Maintaining direct control over Basutoland allowed Britain to retain influence in the region. When the Union of South Africa was formed, Basutoland was left out, not by accident, but by design. Alongside other territories like Bechuanaland and Swaziland, It remained under British
That's
authority
the flag
before
from 66
independence
to
came in
87.
1966. So, why isn't Lesotho part of South Africa? Why is it the only country in the world completely surrounded by another? Because of
It's not the
three
only
things.
country, is it though?
Geography,
I don't think it's the only country. I think there's another country in England or in France, somewhere up there, right? There's another country, bruh. If I'm not
leadership,
mistaken, there's another
history.
country as well.
A history that saw a line drawn around a kingdom in the sky and never erased.
Shout out, man. Shout out Lesotho, bro. I've actually been to Lesotho, man. I've actually been to Lesotho. I had a really, really good time. I need to come back, man. I need to come back and visit like the snow areas, because it wasn't snowing or anything like that. But I need to come to like the snow resorts and stuff like that. But I'm nervous, bro, because I reacted to a video like a few months ago and people were getting stuck, and I don't, hey fam, I don't know. But shout out to my people in Lesotho. Hope you guys enjoy my reaction, my commentary. If you did, smash that like, sub to the channel if you're new. Stay tuned. I see y'all. Peace.